Turkey. So Gul is a PhD candidate in the Chair of History and Architecture and Urban Planning here at the TUL. Her PhD research is titled Impacts of Climate Change and Rural Built Heritage in the Eastern Black Sea region in Turkey. Prior to starting her PhD research, Gul was working in several architectural conservation restoration projects and ecological excavation for over 5 years, and she completed a master in architectural conservation at the University of Edinburgh. Please.
Thank you, Sandra, for the introduction. As Sandra mentioned, my research topic is on impacts of climate change on rural built heritage, the case study of in Rize, which is located in the northeast part of Turkey. But for this today, I will mention about the coastal heritage, which is also closely related to my research topic. The case study I'm working on is located in Kunduklu in Rize, which is in the northeast part of Turkey. The area, as you can see, in the area there are two rivers, main rivers merging with Black Sea, and the area consists of steep terrains. Starting from the coastal part, the elevation starts to increase, and the area receives a lot of humidity, and this with the change in the rain pattern and also humidity, the floods, the number of the floods and intensity and frequency of the floods increased as well. And the trademark of the buildings in the coastal settlements is stone infilled timber structures. Stone infilled structures in the countryside, but in the coastal part, the buildings are called yalı, which were built with stone and brick, which once belonged to fishermen in the area. But these mansions on the coastline are in danger with the human pressure and also the environmental pressure. Recently, I went to area actually twice, and I interviewed with the locals to understand the impacts of these changes on these buildings. And for these buildings, people claim that they have crop failures rather than the flood damage on the buildings, but the buildings were in danger because of the roof structure, which was not financially supported by local administrators to restore these buildings. But with the tourist interest towards the mansions in the countryside, they were financially supporting the mansions in the hinterland. And in these buildings, when the mansion owners use these buildings seasonally, and while they're gone, they hire people, farmers, to take care of the houses and also to share the crops. And for this area, the local income is coming from the tea plantation and exportation. And so the expected, the projected climate change impact in this area can be listed as the decrease in the snowfall in the last 30 years, and the increase in the humidity and rainfall. Also, in this area, with the increase in the temperature of the sea, they are also expecting coastal erosion, which is from low to medium risk. And in this map, you can see that in the coastal part, the red marks show how the floods are affecting the coastal settlements, and whereas in the green patches show the landslide risk in the villages. So although I mainly study the hinterland, but I also had to take a look at the coastal part, because the coastal parts also affecting the hinterland, and hinterland affects the coastal part. Here there are also some pressures coming from the human activities, such as the main construction of the main road, which destroyed the coastal heritage. And the coastal heritage, as we know today, is now described from by Provincial Minister of Culture and Tourism, that the coastal heritage starts from the road, not from the sea anymore, due to the coastal development plans. And also the hydrological electrical power also changed the river charges, river flows, which accelerated the frequency of the floods. And in my first case study to the area, in this village wasn't considered as a landslide risk area, but so there was no flood defense or anything. But in the second case visit, which was 6 months after the first one, they have already completed this wall along the river and consider this place as a risky area, also to river flooding. So as I said earlier, the pressure doesn't only come from the sea, but also from the hinterland. And according to the hydraulic works in the area, the Black Sea region is one of the most vulnerable regions to floods. And with the climate change, it affects the hydrological regime of the rivers, and these floods extend to the farmlands, and they destroy the crops, and it affects not only the built heritage but also the economy and the life in the area. The chart of sectoral damage shows that 45% of the damage is in pastury and agriculture, and 32% is in the infrastructure and building sector. So the use of the local sources teach us a lot about the adverse effect, tackling climate change adverse effects on the landscape, building and society. The continuation of these past climate practices shows the needs of that period, of that society in that period. So for example, they first built all these buildings with only timber, but when they consume the timber, they switched to stone infilled timber structures, and then with the industrialization period, they use brick as an easy way to construct buildings. So all these buildings are considered as heritage, and these coastal heritage has failures and also successes. It failed because of the narrow roof overhangs couldn't protect the building facade from the rainfall, and also against the storms. With the interviews revealed that the plastered facades and mixed construction techniques also failed to protect the building. But it was also a success because of the retreat from the front line of the sea and the elevated with columns and stone walls. Now the behaviors of the societies enact a key role in response to climate change. In the coastal part, people are usually trying to restore their roofs to protect their house, which is a growing issue with the dampness. But in the countryside, people are building stone walls where the mansion entrance face, because this is where the landslide risk is coming from. But and also there are they are also trying to do afforestation and to kind of restore the soil condition, and there are also legal enforcements for the protection of the rivers and forests. But on the other hand, we see construction of huge buildings on the riverfront, which wasn't supposed to be there from the beginning, because these are affecting the river flow and also increasing the floods. Recently, the Minister of Environment and Urban Planning explained this Regional Climate Action Plan, which they put very recently into force, and there are some points that I extracted from it, but none of these points mention any intervention for the heritage. So it's and there are only short-term responses rather than long-term achievements for the tackling the impacts of climate change. And the approach of hydraulic works doesn't have any responsibility on the heritage, and for the heritage management offices, they don't have any responsibility for when a disaster strikes. So this shows that there is no control over the heritage, it's either coastal heritage or the rural heritage. There is no control over the preservation of the heritage. So these buildings are deteriorating without any proper intervention. So basically, most of the implementation of the climate adaptation practices coming from local people, not from the government. And these buildings are not listed as World Heritage Sites, so they are not recognized as international, or they are not recognized internationally or nationally because of their undervalued features, and because they are considered to be only under the management of locals, so the local administrators don't have any control on them. These buildings can show local administrators that there can be actions taken among locals, but it could start with a local or provincial scale, but then it can turn also to a nationally recognized buildings. So there's also the inventory of disaster management agency wasn't updated, so we see the damages, but there is no record of any of these damages on the buildings. Thank you for listening.